Alrighty, aloha everyone in another level living land. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Freedom Fridays. We're here to be able to support you as the entrepreneur in achieving success in your business and life harmony, because it really is two sides of the same coin. We never want to get so busy making a living that we forget to make a life, and it is possible to work smarter, not harder, stress less, strengthen our relationships, and lead with much more energy, ease, and momentum. And we are in store for an amazing treat because we have a very special guest who's going to support us in our life harmony side. I want you to give him a warm welcome. Kevin, thank you so much for blessing us with your presence today.
Well, blessing. Wow. No, we're grateful to be here and grateful for the coordination that you and I employed to make this all happen. So I'm happy to be here and grateful for the time we're going to have together here today. It's going to be great.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you who Kevin O'Connor is before we get started. He's going to be letting us know a very powerful topic about how to reveal the legacies that actually come from our saved family letters. So Kevin O'Connor is the author of Two Floors Above Grief. The book chronicles his experience as a son and nephew of funeral directors while living in a Victorian house built in the 1860s. He has a 50-year career in education at the K-12 and college level in 3 states, with presentations that made in more than a dozen states. He and his husband Leon are parents to 5 sons and grandparents to 7 granddaughters. Wow, that's absolutely amazing, Kevin. So you all definitely know all about Amazing Things family.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Not all, but we certainly have experiences. That's for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, tell us, first before we even get into it, why is this something that's so important? Why is it important to be able to reveal and look into our family's lineage and our family's responses to us? How is that going to impact us now?
Great question. I thank you for asking it. I think I discovered, and I certainly can only speak for myself here, but I discovered in the treasure trove of letters that have been saved among my family members over the years, the last 60, 70, even longer, almost 80 years. I have letters that are 80 years old too. But in having those letters that I've been able to read and organize and read through. When I say read through it, that's saying it too lightly. I mean, I read thoroughly, and in doing so, I discovered that I was being revealed to characters who I thought I knew, like my mom and my dad, and my brothers, my aunt and uncle, and my cousins, and other people in the letters that I saved. But when I'm looking at them in a retrospective sense, it has just been it's not been sort of magical. It has been magical to see their characters revealed in a very, very authentic way. When I was working on the book and selecting the letters that I wanted to use in the book, and then typing the content of those letters into my word processor as I wrote the book, I just felt like almost a spiritual connection to the people who wrote the letters. Even though I knew the people, to know that when those handwritten or typed letters were being worked on by them, it was their words, their thoughts, their thinking right at that moment in time. And so when I think the beauty of it for me has been to have that feeling, to know the legacy that the letters provide. And also I'm grateful to all those who were resolute enough, or I guess that's one word I could use, resolute enough to save them and to keep them, and they might have been in folders or shoe boxes or stuck in between the pages of a book. But as people found them, and then I was fortunate then to have people, not only the letters I saved myself, but the letters that were saved by others to be given to me. And such a gift, and be able to now be able to look at those letters, like I said, that some of them were written in the 1930s, and to know that those were the thoughts of those times. And it's something, I think, as I say in the book, it's something that we don't have now. Not
Mm.
many people write letters. And when I think of I still communicate through text and email, but how many of those emails that I send, or how many of those emails that I receive do I save? They're saved in my computer, but how many have I cataloged? How many of, I can go and access them, but it's not the same, I don't think. And that's the other thing I've tried to point out in the book to younger readers, to say, hey, this is a way that we communicated before internet, before the convenience and the immediacy of a text or the immediacy of an email. So that's part of the beauty that I found in being able to have these letters, part of my own family history. But when I read them, it's not only their personal history, I'm learning about United States history, musical history, mentions of the singers they're listening to, or their bands they went to, or the performance arenas that they went to. So there's these elements of history that are not only personal to me, but represent things that have happened in our country and our world over the years. So that's part of what
Wow.
impacts me. Mhm.
That's so amazing. You mentioned several awesome wisdom about what you learned from them and how you actually have created an even better connection with them as a result of their letters. And one of the things I usually like to say is, in order to know where you're going, especially as an entrepreneur, it's very, very essential to be able to understand where you've been, where that lineage comes from, because then it's like it can be able to be part of all that you are, right? Like
Yeah,
we're more than our families, but we also have this amazing DNA legacy from them that can
yeah.
continue on in our work. That's just so powerful.
Oh,
Absolutely.
really incredible, incredible. Um, I have, building on what you just said, some of the stories I tell in the book are how my uncle in 1930, followed by my father 10 years later, you created the business, and that kind of things they did with marketing and the kind of things in a new town that they really weren't familiar with. How do you come into a town and create a funeral home business in 1930? But when I apply that, what I learned through their letters and through the stories that I've been told, and now after a 50 some year career in education, now I'm a business entrepreneur. I'm a writer marketing my book and marketing speaking engagements and marketing ways that I can reach out to people. And I think, how do I do that? What do I do? But even this morning, I reflected back. Think about how your uncle did it. Think about how your dad did it. They did it step by step. They related to the community in which they were living. What did that community need? How could they communicate with that community? How could they be part of that community? How could they reach out? And they did it in a 1930s fashion. What I'm finding in some of the presentations I'm working on, one being to professionals in the funeral home industry, the people that are just coming into that industry now, they say they're learning from the book, even though my uncle and dad's practices were from almost 80 or 100 years ago. They can apply what they did now to a 22, 23 version of their own experiences in starting a career or maintaining in the profession, whether it be in the funeral industry or whether it be in the education industry, which I continue to be very familiar with. So I think what you're saying, how do we build on the past and how do we use it? And there are ways to do that. There certainly are ways to do that. And I'm really excited about just what I've been able to take in and learn from my ancestors that I lived with, but now thinking, hey, what they did in 1930 with their vision and mission is very similar to what I'm doing and what other people are doing in a 21st century way too.
Oh my gosh, I got goosebumps as you were talking because
Oh,
I was even thinking about, my own lineage and my family who comes from a background of entrepreneurs and their wisdom and how they generated wealth and how they were able to allow their companies to unfold. And we can be able to channel that and bring that in. It's like almost like giving us an amazing start even before we even go on the journey, right? And
mhm.
our business, it evolves over time. So what you're telling me is even those stories of the legacy of how they evolved will also impact us today. um,
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
so tell me, how can we be able to say maybe we don't have letters? There's another part that you had talked about with the need to, and hopefully this is highlighting the need to be able to even create our letters now, because it's not something that we commonly do, but for our future generations, so therefore they can be able to address it. But I want to know, how can we start being able to delve into the stuff? What if we don't have letters like
Mhm.
on hand? What are some of the things that we can do to be able to leverage this?
Well, we could take it, anthropologically. There we go, got that word out. And there was a time when people didn't write letters, but how did those stories end up being passed on? They were through verbalization. They were through storytelling. They were sitting around the campfire or whatever your culture was, whether you were an explorer on a ship or whether you let's go back to the ice age or farther where our cultures started. People told stories. And the last sentence in the book is, just give it to quote it. And this is what I do when I sign a copy of the book. Oftentimes the last sentence is, continue, let your stories flourish and be shared. So I'm not saying there, let your written stories flourish and be shared. I'm opening that up to, yeah, I had the good fortune to have these letters. Like you said, a lot of families, a lot of individuals might not have that, but they do have the stories that have been embedded with them by their ancestors. And those ancestor stories came from other ancestors. Now we have the convenience, the luxury, the technological ability with places like ancestry.com or 23andMe. That's just naming two genealogical resources, but to be able to connect with the names and then imagine that the stories that they were telling. um, I think that's why I say when I sign the book or when I'm talking, let your stories flourish, be alive, be told, and just transfer them. Each of us has a gift, but also I think a responsibility too to pass those stories on. And how do you transfer those stories from parent to child, or in my case, how did I get those stories from grandparent to father to me to my children to their children? So I think it doesn't have, like you said, it doesn't have to be in writing, but we have so many stories, and I think that was part of what motivated me to write the book, from people in my family and my friends. It's not, without even knowing about the letters I had. Who's going to tell these stories that we've been sharing for so long? Who's going to tell the story about Uncle so and so, or who's going to tell the story about the way Dad started his business? Those stories are all in our mental and our verbal repertoires. So it's up to us. I'm in my 70s now, so I want to share those stories so that my offspring and their offspring have a basis to extend those stories, and not, and sometimes I think people have a fear of letting skeletons out of a closet, or telling the things that aren't always so joyful, but that's all part of our heritage, all part of our legacy. And I just encourage people to continue to flourish with their stories and to keep telling the stories and make them come alive.
Oh, I love that. That is absolutely amazing. I feel like what we're doing right now in this time together is like highlighting the need to be able to see. So we may have great grandparents who have passed on. You may have grandparents who are still alive. Start talking with even your parents and hearing their story. It's up to you to be able to create that legacy and at least get it documented. So therefore you can be able to pass it on.
Hmm.
It was interesting. What also came up to me is, okay, maybe we don't have the letters, but what about even obituaries and going
Hmm.
back and hearing the stories and reading those and letting that ignite the fuel in you? Wow.
Oh, yeah. And I pick up on that just from obituaries. I read, from the friends I have that have passed or their parents, and the genealogical sites are really doing a much, but I've been involved with them for about 15 years, the sites, but the enhancements they put in there recently with having access to what you talked about, newspaper articles, obituaries, the stories that are told. In the obituaries, you can pick up more names and connections. Oh, I didn't know that was the name of their grandfather. I didn't know that was my grandmother's maiden name or my great grandmother's maiden name. So those kind of connections just further connect us to the background. And there's so much that we have available to us that our ancestors didn't. When I think of some of the people I read about or I see their name in an ancestry site and know they moved from, my heritage happens to be from Ireland, Sweden, and Italy. When I see those dates and know how they came here and running across, maybe the boarding pass, whatever you called it in those days on the ships, but to know that there's a story behind there, and knowing when they left their homeland, it wasn't likely that they were going to have connections with their parents or their siblings. Somebody made the decision to come or to make a move or to, and in my own family, I see evidence of people moving not only to the United States, but to Australia or South America, other countries. What made those decisions and what made them say, I'm going to let go of the family I'm leaving to go to carve out something for myself? Um, and I think there's such excitement to unpack that, and to know that people made a difference in our lives, and to know that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the steps that other people had taken before me. So I think that,
Oh,
and
good.
that's even aside from the letters, and we documents, letters, artifacts. I just came across from my great great grandfather, which I hadn't seen before just till this week, was the embargo that he was on and how he got his United States citizenship. And it said what ship he came over on. Somebody else posted that among the ancestry sites. And if you're familiar with those, they call them a hint. And I pressed the button for the hint and I thought, wow, that's a document I never knew. How did he get from Ireland to Wales to Pennsylvania? It's just it's exciting to see those, that other people are working with you. I think that's the beauty of these ancestry connections too. People I don't know, but are also invested in learning about the same grandfather that I have, or the same great grandfather or great great grandfather. It's not only the letters, it's just all these heritages that we have access to that really keep me invigorated and keep me searching and keep me resourcing all the time.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Like, so let's pivot, right? So now
Yeah.
we talked about these letters. We've highlighted the amazingness of what is the power of being able to tap in and understand our lineage and our legacy, not only for ourselves, but also for all the way forward. Tell me, how does this relate to the work that you're doing now with with the grief and being
Mm,
able to support people in that capacity as well?
great. Thanks for that question. Um, well, with the other podcast I've been on, I think you said you've listened to a couple, and that becomes a topic. And in the book, I don't really, as the son of a nephew of an undertaker, funeral director, now they call it the death care industry. Um, so certainly I'm not, there are people that know far, far, far more about the psychology of grief, and I'm learning from them. But I was able to tap into it from an funeral home environment and seeing how various families experienced their grief and how they managed or dealt with it, or I guess I'll use the word experienced again. What I learned is from my own growing up in that environment was just the range of ways people experience grief. And it's very, very individual. And so if I know that from myself, I know that from other family members, I know that from cousins and family members that are older than me, how they're getting them, how they're encouraging me to say, have this in place, have this ready. So I look at grief in a more expansive way than I ever did growing up in that environment, or even I have the gift of years now. So the knowing so many people who have been in grief situations, I've learned that grief doesn't go away. Grief, I was just listening to and filling out some, I guess, lack of a better word, forms, and sharing that even though for example, even though my father died almost 40 years ago, it doesn't mean that grief is gone for him. I miss him, but it just comes in different ways. A memory that brings me joy, or a memory that brings me sadness, but the grief, it's still an element of grief. And the other thing about grief, we think of grief sometimes just encompassed with the concept of death, but grief, some of the same emotions we have from feeling a loss and death, we also might feel when we lose a friendship for whatever reason, or we move away from a location where we might not see those people again, or if we're experiencing estrangement from somebody, a friend, a child, a parent. Those all have elements of grief. So grief is really part of life. And what is it, that one, I forget who said it, but grief is the price you pay for love. I mean, if there is a price for love, a cost, maybe that is grief. But I think in saying that statement, it's that gives us a gift to operate from when we're experiencing a loss. And I didn't mention one of the things I talk about in the book was my own family's experience with miscarriages. There's about a 10-year difference between my older brother and me, with no children in between. And what I relate in the book is the story of how my dad explained that to me. And even though I didn't have the exact dialogue of how he explained it, I do have the feeling of being in his presence and the perception of what we talked about. And for a way, so what I've gotten involved in a little bit of that part of grief is, how do parents talk to their kids about a miscarriage that might be occurring in their family? What does that element of grief have to do? So grief and love, they surround us, and it's up to us. Each of us chooses our own way to approach love, approach grief, but to deny that either one is there is certainly a misnomer. Those two emotions are so much a part of living. So I think that's part of some of the things I've been getting into since the book was published, and the conversations I've had with people, and the writing I've done since the book was published.
Nice, nice. I was thinking about, as you were talking and as you were sharing, that it's almost like creates more of an urgency to be able to learn and to be able to document and to be able to experience not only from our lineage but also from our life as well, because tomorrow's not promised, right?
Oh,
And we
never,
never know.
never.
And
Mm-mm.
so we want to be able to make sure that we have that to be able to pass down. So therefore, the future generations can be empowered by our stories, even before they even meet us, or, but even if we're not there.
Yes, yes. And I learned something this week, or was reminded that from another podcast I was listening to, that the guest had said, if in anything we do, if we can leave our interaction with the word "I love you," you never know, like you just said, you never know what's going to happen from the moment that person steps off the curb, or what's going to happen to them tomorrow. So and this particular speaker was so elated that he knew that he, just prior to his parents' both unexpected passings, he had had the opportunity to be with them and say, even though they had their differences, he stressed that too, even though we were having a difference, I always wrap that difference in with a closing statement: "I love you." And he was ever grateful that he had the opportunity to do that, uh, in that last conversation. He didn't know it was his last conversation, but he was grateful that and they were trying to work out a difference they had, but he also closed the conversation with "I love you." And I think that's just something that I took with me from listening to that podcast, and something I can never be reminded of enough. That, and I guess that's the part. Sometimes you think, I couldn't get out of that house, I had to say so many goodbyes. And gee, when I'm going to leave a party or I'm going to leave a reunion, I have to sort of, if I know I have to be someplace else, I better block off about 20 minutes to start the process. So that, you get, you have another place to go, but also you want to be able to know that you left each of those individuals with a feeling of, hey, I love you. So glad to spend the time with you, because you never know what's going to happen next.
Nice. Oh my gosh, that's so good. That's so good. A reminder of to be in that present moment and enjoy those connections. And the possibilities of, hey, if we meet, until we meet again. Right.
Yeah.
Until we meet again. Okay, so what is it how are you serving now? Like, what is it that you are doing with this work and this transformation on how you serve others with this? I know you have the book. Make sure you get Kevin's book. I'll put the link in the show notes so you can get your copy. What else are you doing to be able to be of service in this arena?
Thank you. Well, to be of service, and that was certainly something I learned being the son of an undertaker, a funeral director, because he was certainly in a career of servitude. And I carried that with me into my education career, and spent 50 years teaching, being a principal, being a curriculum, a district administrator, and writer. So I'm still staying active in that. And still, even though I've been retired, I'd use that word loosely, even though I've been retired from the profession of education, I feel I'm serviced in keeping up with their work and ways that I can be supportive. I had a particular interest in the last 10 years of my career to be of service to those in the LGBTQ community, either the students, the parents, the staff. So I stay involved in those networks to share my own experiences, to keep up with those that are experiencing some joy and stress in their school and family environments. So I'm of service there. I've also of service to my parents, their industry, the death care industry, and knowing that what I spoke about earlier, that I can be of service, even though I didn't continue in the profession myself. I feel I can be of service to those that are currently in the industry, and to help them by letting them know about my own experiences and how my experiences and my family's experiences can help them in their pursuits. And it's such a noble and very important profession, the death care industry, to help people and families with preparing and to admitting, I guess, lack of a better word, we have to admit and comprehend that there's an end to each of our existences, but there's also a continuation. And so what can we do now to help our continuation be better and to be of service? So it's those, what I'm being service is through my education profession, my connection to the death care industry, but also service to, in a general sense, in the subject we're talking about today. How can anybody tell their story? How can anybody share their story? How can everybody, anybody, everybody, how can we all keep ourselves alert to the opportunities we have to keep our stories told? And I think that transgresses all professions, all careers, all family situations. What can we do? So those are some ways that I and my own immediate family, I feel I can be of service to my grandchildren, and to just engage in what they're doing, and to share their joy and what they're experiencing, whether they're finishing their graduate degree or whether they're entering kindergarten. That's sort of a range of ages among the granddaughters. So just to, and not that I go out to them to be of service, but I also want to be just know that I'm interested, and know that I take joy and pleasure in what they're experiencing, and be a part of that.
Nice, nice. Kevin, it's almost like that beautiful awareness that you have just by being the example of embracing all of the past, the present, and the future at the same time is just incredible. How
Yeah.
can my audience be able to get to know you or even connect with you further, and get to know more about what you're doing?
Well, thanks for that question. Well, one of the things they can do on a continual basis is I do have a weekly newsletter that goes out, and that it's related to the book, but also it relates to the adventures that the book is taking me on and the people that I'm meeting. So it might be, I have one section of the newsletter that I bring in about every second or third week. Where on earth is Two Floors Above Grief? And so recently a friend of mine went to Scotland, and he took the book with him, and he took pictures of where he was. And so it helped me connect to some travel that I had done to Scotland. So the ways that our listeners can further connect is to go to my website, KevinO'ConnorAuthor.com, and just my name and author and .com. And that's my website that is there. And there's a place there at the end that they can just send me a message. By doing that, I can then get them connected with my newsletter, and then they can learn from that. Because I'm catching myself use the word "cause" because sometimes I'm just laughing because some of my speech teachers from high school and college would probably would say he's still using the word "cuz," but anyway, I digress. But so listeners can connect with me that way. My email is KOCO7351 @gmail. They can connect with me that way. They can text me at 815-546-1076. Those are all avenues. And when I do come to their towns, and they'll hear about that through getting my newsletter. And when I'm in their area, please come and visit with me and be a part of the community that I'm building in different places. I was just in Philadelphia last week. So I take the book on tour sometimes. The visits I make are not so much, they're partly for the book, but it's usually because I've got another connection there, like a family or a friend, and I go there and I create an opportunity to meet with other people who are interested in the service that we all provide. So whether it's to the death care industry or for working with kids, I do all those things. So just if they can, I know those will be in the show notes, but just if they can reach out to me in that way, and I'd be happy to further our discussion with them.
Perfect. Perfect. So we have so many ways to be able to connect with you, Kevin.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
great. I'm so glad that you're doing this work and being that amazing light for so many people, to be able to show them their amazingness through what was,
Yeah.
what is, and all that can be. So tell us, as we close, what would be the biggest takeaway that you would want to leave us with today?
Wow. The biggest takeaway. The biggest takeaway is right off the top of my graying hair here. Not graying, it is gray. The biggest takeaway would be that for each of us to recognize the impact that we do have, that each of us to realize that we all make a difference in people's lives, and there's a whole range of the differences that we can make. But I think for me, and I express this to listeners, this to keep realizing the impact you make, and even in a crowded room in a family reunion, or at a cocktail party, or a reception, or just sitting at a table with people at a neighborhood restaurant, we all have an opportunity to let people know about ourselves, and more importantly, for us to know about them. And I think one of the things I leave with people is to say, I guess we have to, not guess, I know it's just as important, if not even more important, to listen. And we all have a message, we all have a story. But one of my sons says to me, "Dad, how do you work your way around a room, and how do you get to know people?" I'd like to think that what I'm doing is spending more time listening and less time talking. So yeah, I get the opportunity to talk and share, but I think there's such a beauty in the listening part. So I would leave our listeners with that you've given me the opportunity to talk, and for your listeners to listen to me. Each of us has many opportunities to listen to others. So I would give that as my closing statement. So
Oh, thank you so much, Kevin. It's like the power of the connection. That's what you brought us today. Thank you so much for being here and blessing
Thank
us with your
you.
stage
Oh,
and your wisdom. Everyone in Another Level Living Land, let this message soak into your spirit and ignite you throughout the weekend and even beyond. We hope that
yes.
you put your sharing is caring. So share this video for sure, as well as put your biggest takeaway and your feedback in the comments below. We look forward to seeing you again soon on another episode, and have an amazing rest of your Freedom Friday. Bye,
Thank you. Bye
everyone.
bye.